I think film criticism is a way of connecting films with audiences. It's a very specialized, maybe minor way of doing it, and I think judging how successful it is a really, really tough task. But I think that there are movies out there that have been successful because a group of film critics or all have come together and espoused this movie, and I'm not saying that happens for every movie. It happens probably for a very small amount of movies, but I think that there is this kind of sense that if do you remember that there was that Alexei Sales sketch from years ago, and the joke was what would happen if there was a film critics strike, and it was very it's ages ago since I've seen it. It was very funny, and let's ponder on what would happen if there was a film critics strike, and I do think that you need these advocates out there who are flagging up these movies and writing about them and hopefully getting people to go and see them. I think one of the things you kind of mentioned, I mean, obviously if we're talking about film criticism in the digital age, I mean that's my only real frame of reference for talking about this. I don't know what it was like when there were huge blockbusters like The Towering Inferno coming out in like the 70s or whatever, but I think that obviously digital culture has meant that there's a lot, like the way films are marketed are very different, and with a film like the Avengers, websites are basically going to have put out tons and tons and tons of exclusive pictures and trailers and clips, and the knowledge of this film is like total. There's already been a sort of total saturation to the point where that negates any need for criticism. That's not to say that actually when people do, I mean the funny thing is that we do review these big films, and loads of people read those reviews and are really interested to see what we've got to say about it, and they often argue about it, and they'll write comments on it, and it is interesting that those reviews are still very successful despite this kind of belief that maybe these huge films don't need film criticism. I mean,
as a trivial aside, I'd just like to share one of my favourite user comments, which was on our review of Godzilla, and they just said bullshit review is bullshit, and I just wanted to share that. But yeah, in terms of is it important, the question of is it important reviewing films that have massive amounts of money behind them and don't need us to reach an audience, I'd say, is it important to who? David flagged that our readership will read those reviews and get something out of it. So, if you break it down, I mean, it's not important to the film's success, but then there's all different kind of forces at work when you have a job above and beyond the kind of like, the big forces at work. It's important for us because, to be candid, a lot of the time we'll review little films that not that many people will be interested in. We're a small independent magazine. When a big film comes out, that's a chance for us to engage a new readership, and we will approach that film in a way that is the same way we approach all other films that we review. I see the role of criticism or journalism or film reviewing just like at its purest form, another piece of writing, and I think there's always space in the world for a piece of writing that comes from the heart and is at least trying to do something with that. So I guess it's hard to say that's important to the industry or anything, but from a pure writer's perspective, I think that's always important.
I know there are some people who might write a review like for the ages, which generally means it's full of spoilers. But like, I don't think you should be writing a review thinking about when it's going to be read, because I mean, cinema is or maybe movies is such a sort of transitory thing now, with like 20 films coming out per week, and God knows how many DVDs and streaming premieres coming out, and I think this idea of before and after, I don't know, I just can't. It's something I think if you strain yourself to be thinking about that, I think you just got to focus on the movie and say what you want to say about it. I know that's kind of a bland thing to say, isn't it? But like,
it's not bland.
I don't know. I mean, have you ever written? No, I've never knowingly written thinking this has got to be read up before or after the film. I think sometimes I write with a kind of, maybe that the reader should have some knowledge of this director's other films, but never. There is always a sense that I want it to be able to be read. Cannes is probably the best example. I mean, it's a very kind of inside baseball thing, and it's a really enjoyable thing to sort of go and see a movie and then sort of have that kind of ripped from the heart response to it. And you have to sort of remember that you're basically writing exclusively for an audience who hasn't seen this movie but is probably very excited to see it. So you don't want to ruin it for them. You don't want to you just want to. I think with those kind of things, you want to give them a sense that I want to see that movie. Or oh my God, that sounds awful.
So I think we've inherited this a bit from David. Not to keep banging on about all the things he's bequeathed me, but I personally, the thing I take from films is their ideas, it's their comments on humanity, it's their perception of humanity, it's all the really deep stuff that is underneath the surface. And so I would say that if I feel like a film has done that in some way, shape or form, I will try and angle the review so that can be expressed, and what the film does that is important can be expressed. So so that maybe
sorry, wait for them to oh okay, got keys.
You go to lock up.
See you later. Rewind a bit.
Right. Sorry, you were saying that you think the most important aspect is engaging with the ideology of the film. I think that's what you meant. That's what you were saying. That so teasing out the kind of undercurrents of what material the film is presenting. Is that
exactly right? And you asked earlier about if someone's reading afterwards. I do think about that a bit in terms of, if obviously we've watched a lot of films, and so without tooting our own trumpets too much, maybe we're a bit more scene literate than the person that might go and see a film. And I do think, so if somebody watched the film and they were kind of on the fence about it, and I mean, just because I sometimes, if I'm not sure about a film, I'll read a review to try and gain some clarity about the ideas. So sometimes I do write thinking, if I can convince one person that the ideas are in there and are worthy of consideration, then that seems like a worthwhile thing to do.
Horses for courses. I think that there are certain films that you don't just want to come down on with some kind of stern adjudication. I mean, I personally try and avoid that kind of thing in general. I mean, so, I think it kind of comes back to that question of whether review, criticism is a sort of, a thing about advocacy or analysis or service provider, and I think I really hate one of a kind of pet peeve of mine is where you have you have your review and then you have that line at the end and it says, ultimately it's a really good movie, I think you should go and see it, or ultimately give this one a miss, and that kind of little kind of kicker at the end, it's just you never need it. I think if you went through the history of film criticism, removed every time someone had done that, it wouldn't make any difference. In fact, you'd end on a probably a much more interesting and intriguing note where you'd think, I think I get what this person has said, and I'm going to go and see this movie or not. And it's that kind of, people have to spoil it by telling people what to do. And I think that's the thing. It's like don't tell people what to do. Don't ever say. You should never say don't see a movie, because I mean, it's that's just wrong. I think that's actually something that my editor, when I used to work at Time Out, Dave Calhoun, he was very like, his kind of one piece of advice was like, never tell people just not see a movie, because everyone's going to have a different opinion on it, and this is yours. So you shouldn't be like beating your chest and saying, leave this one.
So how does your advocacy express itself? Given that you don't have simple statements of go see this film or this is a good film, how do you want your advocacy to come through in a review? I'm not trying to trip you up, by the way, because it's a really, really interesting question to me. It's like
I mean, no.
Like it can.
Yeah, no. I think that it's the way I think you want to show someone, even if they're not maybe reading a review and responding in a sort of very detailed and profound way to every statement you've made about this film and what it does and what it says and its ideology. I think ultimately you want to sort of show people that this is a film worthy of being looked at rather than just being seen, like it just properly engaged with. I mean, like, there was a film the other day that came out as a re-release of a film called Cry of the City by Robert Siodmak, and it's just one of those films where I just felt like I could have written about it, because there was just so much in it. And that for me, I mean that's kind of, I guess that's enthusiasm, but you've got to kind of curb that in a way. Sorry.
Great show.
Yeah, sorry. You've got to obviously respect the fact that the reader is probably not going to want to read a 2,000 word diatribe on a film like that. So it's trying to, I think it's showing that there is interest in here and there is depth. And I think some of the best film critics that I read and read do that, and they play with the form as well, and in an interesting way.
I think having 3 different star ratings gives you more wiggle room. This is going to sound really grandiose, but you can talk about the journey of you and the film, and also I'm not the biggest fan of star ratings, but you can kind of hedge your bets a bit. If you're like, I don't know whether to give this a 3 or a 4. You can give it a 3 and a 4. And yeah, like I guess that's where you can put the service journalism part to use. Like, there will be some people that are just on your site looking at the stars, and yeah, you can just be like, yep, that's where that is. So yeah, I don't have that much additional thoughts. So David.
Well, I mean, this star rating system was developed, in the kind of prior to the magazine's first edition. So it's something that's always been there, and I'm pretty sure it'll always be there. And I like the fact that it gives our reviews a distinctive edge. They're not just big wedges of text with some sort of a little kind of number at the end. There's actually I think you're kind of forced maybe at a sort of metaphorical gunpoint to actually think about these separate anticipation, enjoyment in retrospect, and yeah, I mean it's a weird one, because I think star ratings have their pros and cons, and I actually think sometimes if you see a film and you're watching it and you think that's a 3-star movie, that would be maybe like that's your kind of primal response to a movie. I actually think it's actually easier to write a piece of criticism with that in your head. Like you kind of achieve, you can achieve a certain tenor, and it gives you a sense of focus almost, I think. Whereas if you have no idea what you would rate this film out of 5, I think you'd be sat in front of a blank Word document for a long time, actually trying to think. Well, I mean, I in defence again of star ratings, I do think that they are they are another way that connects film criticism to the sort of the industry, and it's a way of I guess that distributors and marketing companies use those star ratings as a way to sort of show advocacy of certain people in this very kind of primal way. And there's this very, I think the star ratings is it's obviously a visible thing, it's a symbolic visible thing that it needs no real further interpretation. And you may get us giving, I don't know, Inherent Vice 5 stars might be different to us giving Godzilla 5. They're different types of 5-star reviews, but yeah. I mean, I understand that like having a star rating is I think is the thing that delineates between that status of critic and reviewer. I think, and I guess that a lot people working in this industry would rather have the chance to be critics and not have that millstone of star ratings around their neck would help them achieve that, I guess.
Given that star ratings, obviously in the way that they're used by Little White Lies, it's a very fine-tuned system. It's very different from the kind of star ratings apportioned by other magazines or other publications, because you have 3, and because you have text accompanying each of the ratings that you give. But I wonder whether star ratings also, as you suggested, have a value for newspapers and not for newspapers but for advertisers and for people promoting the film. And I wonder whether, if for example Little White Lies gave a film 2, 4, 1, say, it's kind of unimaginable, or 2, 4, 2. Which star rating is it that appears in the newspaper? Which do you grant to the newspaper?
I think this has come up many times, and it's all done on, it's all very much a case-by-case basis. Sometimes, I think when it comes to those questions of the fact that there's 3 different ratings, that's actually when the tone of the review will come into play. If the review is overwhelmingly negative, then maybe we would think twice about it. I think one of the things as well is actually one of my jobs, I guess, is to make sure that the reviews fit the text. Like the tone and tenor of what's being written is actually consistent with the stars being awarded. So I guess that prevents that from happening. There being a kind of question of which one to use. But it's not a great answer, I know, but it's very much like individual cases, and I don't think we've ever really had a problem with it in the past.
And so, Sophie, at the end of your review or at the beginning of your review, when it comes to the time when you have to apportion the 3 star ratings, do you agonise over it, or is it very instinctive?
Oh, I totally agonise over it, and sometimes I take consultation. I'm like, I don't know whether this is a 3-star or a 4-star. But yeah, it can be a good way to cement what you think of a film as well, and it's generally it generally is at the end of the review rather than the beginning of the review that I would decide on the numbers.
So how's the business of film criticism and film journalism changed since you started?
I don't think I've been doing it for long enough for it to have changed very much. So I'm going to cede ground to David Jenkins.
I don't really know, to be honest. I've got to say, obviously I do write features and interviews and other things like that. But if we're just talking about the business of reviewing films, I guess
not actually. It's all big.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just. It's probably easier to focus on reviewing films, but I think the main thing to have changed, I think, and it's a really boring thing, is the medium by which we get to see movies now. When I started, I pretty much saw everything at a cinema on a screen, a screening room in Soho. Now I'd say that probably 70% of weekly releases are probably available via a Vimeo stream, or that I can watch on my TV at home, which is obviously, you know, never preferable, but you know, we're kind of half an hour away from the centre of town, and you know, it kind of saves on resource and time and everything, and you know, it is an easier way to do it. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's I mean, other than that, I really cannot think of a way that film criticism has changed. I mean, maybe I actually can't remember a time before embargoes. Yeah, I think in review embargoes, I think there was obviously, you know, there was obviously nothing in place at a certain point in time, and outlets were basically seeing movies and just posting and getting the jump on all these print publications, which, you know, were obviously helping, you know, towards the demise of print medium, I guess. And I think, you know, this was embargoes were a kind of corrective in that way. And you know, it's a weird thing, I guess. I mean, it definitely removes a hierarchy, I guess, where you had, you know, there are always going to be cases where there will be outlets who see a film before other outlets, and there is a sort of, you know, I guess behind the scenes, you know, there is probably a kind of natural order of things where, you know, certain outlets have picked before other outlets to see certain movies and vice versa. So yeah, no, yeah. So other than that, no change.
When I did my journalism masters, we got given stats about what type of people get into journalism, and believe it or not, it was predominantly white rich people. And I think any platform that kind of maybe opens the playing field up a bit is good. And yeah, I don't think that online readers are just mindless people that will gobble up any form of content. So yeah, I think it's good to open up the playing field, and I don't think I mean, it is a bit of a threat, but it means everyone has to really rethink about how they're going to not just produce their content, but put it out there. And so yeah, I mean, it is a threat, and it is a challenge for us, an ongoing challenge for us to reach people. But I don't think it's a serious danger for quality writing, because I think people will always want to seek that stuff out.
I think one of the things about that, yeah, the sort of uprise in sort of digital media, is that, I mean, it has made, I guess it's never been easier to become an expert in film. And I think one of the criticisms that the old kind of print guys used to say about, you know, oh, those bloody bloggers, you know, that they don't have the years and years of watching movies that I do. And actually they did, but they just saw them in a different way, and they, you know, they maybe didn't, you know, put in the hard hours and see them in the kind of through the official routes, I guess. But I think I think this is the kind of age of instant cinephilia, for better and for worse, I guess. And you can, you know, you do read stuff and you kind of think, I recognise that from Wikipedia or something, and you know, I put my hands up, and I you know, I've there have been times where I have, you know, gone to, you know, drunk from that poison chalice myself, and you know, hopefully I think I might have got away with it, but you know, maybe people have personal vendettas against me. But
what are you confessing to?
Oh no, this, you know, it's that kind of, I guess one of it's really, I think it's much harder to be a kind of critical Puritan now than it was. You know, there's so much content out there, and, you know, easy access. You can, you know, you want to read an interview with Claire Denis, you can read 50, you know, in like an hour. You know, they're all there for the taking. You can read them all. You're suddenly Mr. Claire Denis, you know.
I love this image you have of the internet of people just devouring Claire Denis interviews.
Well, no, they you know, if one would need to, then one could, you know. And you know, I do know loads of critics who have this, like, you know, voracious appetite for that kind of thing. You know, they will seek out super obscure movies and watch them and read everything about them and enthuse about them, and go on to things like Letterboxd and write massive long reviews of them, for a very highly rarefied audience. But and that's great, because essentially doing that kind of stuff is what's gonna, writing is what makes you a better writer.
In this new kind of digital age, do you think that the writing is on the wall for the print journalist? Do you think that print will go the way of the dinosaur, or is it here to stay?
I don't think it's going to go the way of the dinosaur, but I think, to labour the dinosaur analogy, but the dinosaur analogy, I think people will need to supplement the stuff they're doing with print with other forms of activity, but it doesn't mean that the print form will be deceased. It just means that people have to juggle more.
I think that, obviously, like, our magazine is, I would say, although it's not meant to be, it probably is predominantly a print product. I think, we've been asked to balance it more with our kind of digital activity, but it is hard because it does take so much time and effort and hard hours to actually put together a print product, and it does, there is something a bit more, it's the kind of old, the kind of obvious response is that there is something like nicely tangible about print. And I think one of the things that we're doing as a magazine, that's the thing, when you're talking about print, I don't want to talk for anyone else.
No, I want to hear about your magazine.
That's the thing. All I can say about it is Little White Lies, and I think that we are constantly, we're trying to think of ways to preserve print and to do and maybe accept that people aren't buying magazines that offer them stuff that can be found on other media. And I think that the sort of driving force behind Little White Lies is actually trying to make something that cannot be consumed in any other media. Like, to get the experience of reading this magazine, you have to buy it, and you have to pick it up, and you have to touch it, and you have to smell it, and you want to look, something you maybe want to look at and keep, rather than go through it and throw it in the bin. But there's things like magazines like The Economist and New Statesman and The Private Eye are just, they're still doing amazingly well. Bucking all these kind of industry trends, and I guess you could pretty much read. You could read everything they have in them online, I guess. No, you probably actually, no, you couldn't, could you? But still, there are print products out there that are still doing, still successful, and from both sides of the some stuff, things like ours. Things like, more sort of service-driven editorial, things like Private Eye.
What future do you see for film journalism, and in particular for the professional film journalist? And by professional, I mean paid.
Again, I just think that film journalists are going to have to become more resourceful. Like, you already see with The Guardian, they're doing their film show online. People are having to be more conversant with multimedia, and I just think, there was probably a time where you could know print media inside out, and you could earn a living that way. I think it's just a bit more of maybe an anxious time, because people are like, I can do this, but I don't know how to do that, and I don't have a social media strategy, and I'm not very camera friendly, and I just think that the people that will probably do the best moving forward are people that are pretty adaptable.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I don't know. It's hard to really speculate on how things are gonna turn out. The fact that a festival like Cannes is able to, I guess, film critics, film journalists are the sort of fuel behind a festival like that. It needs people to come along and see the films. It needs people to write about the films. It needs people to write about Cannes. And it's, you know, these festivals are bigger and more successful and glitzier and starrier every year. And so, I mean, you know, maybe just looking at something like that as a test case, that, you know, there is still life in the old girl yet, I guess. But yeah, I do think that there is massive, you know, I think the days of being just a film critic are like going if not gone. You know, being film critic as, you know, solo job title is probably not something that I can't think of it existing anywhere really. I mean, you have freelancers, of course, who would do, you know, will focus on film criticism for various publications, but like, you know, I think as a sort of paid staff job, you know, recently the Independent on Sunday fired all their staff arts critics in one swoop. They, you know, it was part of their strategy. They didn't feel they needed them anymore. So, you know, there are, you know, people maybe don't are seeing they don't want to pay for things that do exist online, but then maybe they're missing the value of having a kind of authoritative voice on a subject that people want to, you know, that would be someone's route into another, you know, to seeing a movie or doing something or buying something. And yeah, I don't know. Will we be here next year? We're
going to be here next year. We'll be here next month.
Also, you mentioned, Sophie, that before online came along, I might be misquoting you slightly here, but that there was a predominance of rich males. Basically.
Oh yes.
Rich white males. So I wonder whether you think that are female or ethnic or other minority voices excluded from the province of film journalism, and how might this be changed, and how are they excluded?
Well, every industry reflects the wider society, and I don't think anyone would claim that we live in a society that is equal for genders or for races or for any type of minorities. So I think it's a massive question, and if I could tell you how we would solve this problem,
Nobel Prize.
Exactly. I don't know. I just think. So to answer the initial question, what obstacles there are? The obstacles are that if a machinery is a conservative machinery, then it perpetuates the type of machinery that it is. It's a loop. It's a feedback loop, and so there just need to be people that are working within the industry that have some power, that are willing to make some changes. And people need to abandon the mindset of, oh, I'm not part of the problem, I'm just going to put my head down and do my job. People need to want change, and they need to want to be a part of change, and they need to own the power that they have. And that all sounds very grandiose, but in practice that just means looking at, like, David's an editor. I think he's very aware, you know, of like the kind of how it breaks down gender-wise, how it breaks down ethnic minority-wise. And it's not to say that then he's like, shit, I need to get more female voices, I need to get more ethnic voices. It's just when somebody comes along that has the kahunas, then yeah, just being very, very willing to give them chances and opportunities. And it just needs a task force of people who don't just want to do their job, they want to do bigger things as well. So a lot of problems that a lot of people have is tunnel vision, like, I'm doing my job down here, social problems exist beyond me. People just need to just accept the social problems that are inherent in every industry, and that, you know, that they have the power to do some good.
And do you see, you know, from your perspective, and this is addressed to both of you, do you see the landscape changing and improving, or do you think this is just an aspiration? I mean, do you think things are getting better, and that there's greater representation of different voices within film journalism?
I'd be really interested to hear your perception, because obviously you get a lot of pictures of people getting in touch with you. You know, have you found that changing?
I mean, yeah, I guess it's. I guess I haven't been in. I guess I haven't been in the position I have been for long enough to really notice any kind of seismic shift in in the type, types of people who want to become film critics or write about films. And I think there seems to be a trend of I guess like maybe like female critics who maybe want to write about who are really passionate about female film directors, or Ashley Clark is a critic who from the UK, but he's moved to New York. He's, I think, for my money, one of the best film critics on like modern black cinema there is, and he's just he's taken that domain and he just owns it now, and it's incredible what he's done in a tiny amount of time. And I think that the sort of the quality of what he does from when I first commissioned him to what he does now is like it's stratospheres ahead, and it's amazing to think that he's doing it. But I guess on that sort of micro level there are obviously great things happening, and there are people minorities doing things like that are really impressive. But I couldn't say if there was a wider obviously like most of the I mean, I think that Britain is actually, there are kind of, I don't know, are there a good amount of female film critics?
I've got a nice coterie of female film critic friends, and this is another thing that we were talking about, what online has done. I met Simran through her contact me on Twitter. It's like, if you want to find a certain type of person who's coming from a certain type of angle, you can find them. Or
they'll find you.
Or they'll find you, exactly, when you're least expecting it. And then a friendship will blossom. So it's a resource for people to find people that have a similar political angle to them. And that's a great thing, because that's an empowering thing.
Okay, and I guess my last question is going to be a complete change of tack, and you're going to really hate this question, because it's in a way
is
it's
it
the least
what do you love about movies?
And the most no, it's not. It's the least challenging, the most challenging question I'm going to ask. But basically, really, everything I've asked is just an excuse to get you talking about what you do, right? But inevitably, there are going to be all kinds of things that I haven't addressed that maybe you want to get off your chest or that you want to say, and this is your platform. So, is there anything about film journalism that you'd like to talk about? It's a long question, but it's
right.
It's not entirely new. I think I've probably touched on it a bit, but I'm really against this kind of like in any industry, a kind of ghettoization where it's very comforting to be part of a community. It's so comforting, it's so nice, and you know people in it, and people know you in it, and it's lovely. But I really think the most important films, and in turn the most important people writing about films, they find a way to kind of reflect it back on the world beyond us, in which we are very, very small. And the critics I love do that, and not only do they shine on the real world, there's also the internal world as well. And for example, Robbie Collin, I really liked his Avengers review. I think some people were quite sniffy about Avengers, but he wrote about it, and I could feel the pleasure it gave him inside. I could feel the emotion and the passion. I think he described it as like a calorie-rich rush, and it's like visceral. So I guess the thing I want to say about film journalism is that it can be a place for people to do good, or for people to express themselves in a really deep way. And yes,
I concur. I mean, more. I think maybe going back to one of the earlier questions about how film criticism has changed. I think one of the things with print, obviously, there was a very for most publications there was a very strict style guide. This is how you review a film. You start with an opening line where you give a bit of context, then you do a bit of plot, and then you do a bit of analysis, and then you have your round off line, and then you're down the pub basically. And I think that what the internet has done is just allowed the form to breathe a bit more, and also it's allowed for this new form of like personal journalism. And I don't mean like bloggers going like, I love this movie, I thought this, I thought that, but it's actually like these there's this kind of, I don't know what you'd even call this, like a sort of small wave of film critics that I'm super fond of, who, and I guess Robbie is one in a way, but he kind of he doesn't make it about himself, but he puts himself into the review. Like, I mean, without kind of without just sort of writing his opinions, this is what I think, these are my opinions, you actually get a sense that you're talking to someone rather than they're talking to you, like there's a conversation. And I think online critics are just really, that you can get some really good deep insights where you can actually, I think drawing on personal life experience was at one point a critical no. It's like, well, what's a reader going to care about the fact that you did this and it resonated for you in this way? But actually, like, personally, I love reading about that stuff. I love, some might see it as indulgent or half-assed, but actually it's just a new way of looking at a movie and looking it through a personal prism, I guess. And yeah, I guess when it comes to commissioning for Little White Lies, I think that's I'm all about people who are kind of transcending the form, I guess. Not they've learned how to do the opening, synopsis, analysis, ending, and now they're basically learning how to break all those rules and how to offer something fresh. And
can I add something else as well?
Go ahead.
To bring up Robbie Collin again and the kind of the exhilarating.
So Robbie Collin loving.
Yeah, exactly.
Hope he's not watching.
I felt the palpable pleasure that he was experiencing watching Avengers, and I recently went to a BFI panel about Laura Mulvey, and it was kind of remembering her essay Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, and I just think it's a kind of madness that, like, the deeper people get into cinema, the less willing they are to acknowledge that they're enjoying themselves watching films. And I think that's madness, because, like, when you first start this job, and when you first start, well, definitely when I first started, you're not getting paid, you're doing it because you just love it and you're just happy to be there and you're happy to go to a Brad screening. And you think it's the holy grail that you could ever get a job writing about cinema, going to cinema for free. It seems like the holy grail. And it just seems that people just, like, forget that. And it's like watching a film, this is kind of going back to the kind of critical snipey thing that I don't think is a force for good. It's like waiting for a film to trip up, and it's like, no, like, the cinema is amazing. Cinema, it can be magical, and obviously it's not all the time, and you can't just let all films off the hook. But I really like film journalists that remember to have a good time and don't think it's a crime to incorporate that fact into their writing.
But I would say that additionally, I don't like it when a film critic says, I enjoyed this film in a film review.
Yeah, but he
that's the review, apparently.
Yeah.
Because that person says he enjoyed it, that's why you should see it. And that, for me, is like garbage.
Well, no, it's like you have to kind of encode it in a way that's like doing lots of things at once, that's expressing the film, but with a kind of exhilaration powering. And that's where the craft comes in, and that's why it's not just like, a 5-year-old going to the cinema and then saying that was really good.
It's totally, yeah. I mean, it is like stopping, looking what you've written, and just thinking, can I say this without saying it? And I guess maybe now it's harder to do that because it's less time to write reviews because you have to write blogs and features and tweets and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's a good thing to strive for.
Do you think that this is going to be the new age of the character reviewer? Where all film journalists have to be sort of characters, and the protagonists of their own writing, and
It's funny you said that because my housemate actually had pitched an idea for like a kind of a sitcom based around film critics.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
That
It's
could
gonna be funny.
But I don't know. Like, I don't think we're under pressure to develop like lovable, exaggerated quirks that we can then market to the highest bidder.
Yeah, if you're doing that, as long as you're doing it subconsciously, that's like, again, I think it comes back to this idea of critic or reviewer. It's not for you. It's not. It's for that's something for someone else to say, not you. I think. And I think the same with this. If you are if you have character in your writing, or there is a certain again, Robbie probably is the one of the.
Why aren't we wearing "I Love Robbie" to Cullen t-shirts?
Yeah. And Peter Bradshaw as well. I mean, you read his reviews and you kind of imagine him on a kind of casting couch with a cigarette holder and a crushed velvet blazer, telling you what he's writing, and I think that's I guess what it's Pulp Fiction, isn't it? You must have character, or is it you must have character. I totally muffed that quote.
Well, that's your character. You're kind of like mumbling earnest, charming.
Is it Vincent? Yeah, it's Winston Wolfe, isn't it? Winston Wolfe. You have to dub that over afterwards. Is you must have character. You must not be something like that.
You can fade out to this.
Yeah. A friend of mine was working for the Liverpool Student newspaper as a music album reviewer, and I was jealous of his weekly bylines and the fact that he seemed to be getting more and more print coverage every week. So I went along with him to the office, and they said there was a massive pile of discarded, unwanted, unloved DVDs, well, VHSs I think it was at that time, on the table, which I kind of procured and said I'd be like Homent's DVD video reviewer for them. So I did that for a bit, and again it is that I think maybe that is one of the things that has changed, like this idea that so far fewer film critics get to see their name in print now, and than maybe they would have like 10 years ago. So that sort of romantic thing doesn't really exist in the same way, whereas online, I guess it's that idea of someone else having to sort of take your words and do magically do something with them and put them on a page, whereas online you to a lesser extent, I guess, you don't really have that anymore. But anyway, that I think just pure arrogance of seeing my name there made me think that I want to do this a bit more. So